and I will first of all kia ora, Sue, and welcome to our CDANZ branch meeting, and thank you very much for talking to us. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa to everyone. Thank you for giving us your time. Thank you very much for agreeing to share your knowledge, Sue. It's really wonderful. I was just catching up with Sue before, and she's getting requests from all over the place. COVID has been, as terrible as it sounds, a marketing opportunity and possibly a way of changing the world in which we work and live in. The session will take an hour, roughly. I'll be recording it, and it will be available in a couple of days once I've uploaded and what have you. And I'll hand over to Sue, Australian author extraordinaire, LinkedIn specialist and career development practitioner, and a member of CDAA in Australia. Over to you, Sue.
All right. Well, Sam, I might just start off with a general introduction about how I ended up in this position that might be reasonably relevant. I was born in Adelaide in South Australia, and I started my career at Westpac, which is one of the big 4 banks in Australia, 6 days after my last Year 12 exam. And I stayed with the Westpac as a career recruit and started part-time study, and stayed there until 1994 when I moved to Melbourne as a result of my ex-husband's work. And when I got here, I got a job in a recruitment firm because I'd been doing recruiting for the bank. And shortly after, I found out I was pregnant. And I spoke to one of the directors of the firm, and he said not to tell them I was pregnant. And so I didn't. And then I got sacked. And I was devastated because, you know, I'd had this 11-year career at the bank, and I was a really good worker, and I just couldn't believe that it had happened to me. Of course, when you're pregnant, you can't get a job. And as soon as my daughter was born, I was getting offered lots of jobs, and I thought, this is crazy. As a 29-year-old breastfeeding woman, I'm in demand, and what on earth is going to happen when I turn 40? And so I realised that for me, the best way to remain employable was to keep getting educated. And I was studying my formal degree then. I started that just before I left Adelaide, because I started off with a business certificate from a TAFE college, Technical and Further Education College. And I was doing my degree by correspondence. And I thought, well, you know, that's really great. And then when I came to the last subject of my degree, because of this experience of moving from Adelaide to Melbourne and being an Australian and finding it difficult to make friends, I asked my university lecturer if I could do a research project into this issue with the view to it being a website in the future. And so that all happened. I got a high distinction for my research report. I surveyed 96 people who'd moved to Melbourne within the last 5 years. Most of those people wanted a 24-hour telephone advice service, and that had been tried and failed, so I wasn't going to do that. And the next most popular option was a website. So I did that, launched it in 2001. And in 2003, I went looking for online networks because I could see that that was a way for people to connect and to find, you know, resources and so on. And that would be helpful to newcomers. And so I joined LinkedIn. So I'm member number 77832, one of the first 80,000 people in the world on LinkedIn. And, you know, things kept rolling along, and I kept doing contract work and all sorts of things. And then in 2008, there was a lady called Jan, and she's happy for me to share her story. And she spent the first 25 years of her life growing up in Australia, and then the next 25 years all over the world, and most recently India, the US, so on. And now she was back in Melbourne. And she came along to a couple of my events, and she said, Sue, I want you to help me get a job. And I thought, oh, okay. And I thought, well, she'll need her LinkedIn done. So that's when I started the whole LinkedIn thing. And it's been really interesting. I could tell you heaps more about Jan's story because it's a fascinating case in itself. But I started consulting on LinkedIn since then, and I eventually became a career development practitioner. It took, I think, 3 years for them to believe that I could provide those services. In 2016, I wrote 3 80,000-word books in 8 months, which you can see behind me. The first one was all about LinkedIn. The second one is about how to attract the right career or business. So I like people to have opportunities come to them rather than to have to push themselves out on others, because I'm an introvert for a start. And the third one is about how to market your business hyperlocally, which is about attracting business from your local community, because I'm very much about community and networks and the importance of being part of a community, particularly coming from Adelaide, where I was the eldest of 27 grandchildren, and I come to Melbourne and I'm, you know, just Sue. So that was quite a transition. And also the fourth book was obviously Gigsters, which is how Sam came to, you know, invite me along. So the first book was very technical. The second book was very story driven, because having dealt with people who've been unemployed, and I should also add, 6 months after I married my husband at 20, he became unemployed, and he was unemployed for most of the next 19 years before I left. So I have a really intimate understanding of unemployment through, you know, his experience. And so the third book was case study driven, but Gigsters was written as a conversation piece to really help people understand that it was really their responsibility for their career and how could they manage it themselves. Because I think that the challenge for a lot of career development practitioners is we have all these assessments and tools and so on and so forth, but a lot of our clients come to us and they don't really fit any of those tools exactly. And we find that some of these tools have weaknesses, and my philosophy is that the person themselves knows themselves the best, but they don't always understand how to get to an answer. So it's about helping them go through that process themselves. So what I focus on, oh, by the way, I should also add, you know, in that journey, I spent 3 years reading books. Do What You Love, The Money Will Follow, Find Your Purpose in Life, What Colour's My Parachute. You know, I did all that kind of stuff and still didn't have an answer. And I thought, how can this be? I've read all these books and I still don't know what to do. But anyway, I've written an article, and if you Google it, it's #1 on Google search results. It's how to choose your next job or career. And it's a little mind map exercise where you start with your non-negotiables and then you brain dump everything else. You leave it, you come back, you circle the main things, and basically you end up with a decision-making framework. Because the reality is now there's so many things that you can choose to do, but where do you start? You know, like if you were a woman, you know, 60 years ago, you could be a teacher, a secretary, or a nurse. And as soon as you had a baby, that was it. It was stopped. So obviously now you can be a rocket scientist, you can be a rock star, you know, you can be anything. So how on earth does one make a choice when there's so many things? And now we're hearing about multi-potentialites or something or other. There's all these different terminologies for people who don't just want to be a rocket scientist. They also want to be the rock star and something else and something else and something else. So I believe that with technology, this whole world of work is changing. And so the opportunity for us to just sit and do a job for 8 hours a day or stand or whatever it is we're doing 8 hours a day and then go home, it's not really going to exist in the future. And I also think with technology, we're going to say, well, I actually really like my creative side, and I really like my logical side, and I really like my expressive side. And, you know, there's all these elements to who you are, and you would like to be part of all of those. So in the Gigsters book, I talk about 3 things. And the first one is understanding your values. The second one is your strengths, both natural and acquired. And an example I use is I'm really good at accounting and I hate it. And yet I've had to acquire digital skills because, of course, they didn't exist in the course and half my course was out of date anyway. And the third one is context. And I think that this is one that has been underestimated in the field of career development for way too long. And I think it causes a lot of career confusion as well. So when because my dad worked shift work and I would go up to 3 days without seeing him, I always said I would never marry a man who was away, you know, because I wanted the father to be around for the children. Well, I definitely got the opposite. He was home all the time because he was unemployed. But because he was unemployed, and when I left, I still wanted to be with my children. So I couldn't go out and get a high-flying job, working 12-hour days, traveling around the world. It just wasn't going to be possible because I wanted to be around for my children. I also didn't have any backup childcare because I was interstate. And so all of these things meant that I actually had part-time income from my work, part-time income from the government in form of welfare payments. I continued studying, and I also did a lot of voluntary work as my way of returning, you know, some of the benefit of receiving those welfare benefits. And because I kept learning, now that my children are older and left home, I can fully resume my career with plenty of current skills and do all the creative things that I've ever wanted to do. And certainly my income has not been as high as it could have been if I had a different lifestyle, but my context meant that my highest value was spending time with my children and making sure that I was learning and growing and all these things, and having a relationship, and that I've achieved. So who cares about the money? You know, lots of people will say the money means nothing, I've now lost my health, blah, blah, blah. But I've actually lived my life according to my highest values. And to me, that's what being a gigster is all about. My definition that I've created of a gigster is somebody who uses technology to attract aligned gigs. So I have information online that helps people find me. When they look at that information, they self-select and they decide Sue is way too much for me, or Sue is not enough for me because I just want it done for me, or Sue is the right one for me, and then, you know, we'll go forward. I quite often refer people on to others if I don't think we're a right fit. I'm not anxious about that at all. And if all of you steal every piece of content I've written and reuse it, I'm thrilled to bits. You know, you use whatever you like of what I've written. I'm more than happy for you to recycle, reuse, reproduce. You know, there's enough for all of us. And if it's helpful to you or your clients, I'm more than happy to share it. If you ever want me to write something, let me know. If you want to ask me a question, let me know. You know, I'm always open to that. I've spoken at multiple CDAA conferences around Australia. And, you know, most people know me in Australia as a LinkedIn specialist. That's what I'm known for. And if you Google LinkedIn Specialist Australia, I'll come up on the first page of Google search results because I've learned how to search engine optimize. I also teach at the Centre for Adult Education. So I'm very passionate about being a practitioner educator, because I think unless you're practicing something, it's not really the best way to educate. And now, thanks to COVID, instead of attending between 1 and 4 events a week, it feels like 10 or 15 events a week because there's so much available online, and I've just got access to LinkedIn Learning. I'm doing a writing, you know, thing, and, you know, like it's just so much that you can do now that COVID's occurred. I saw an article on LinkedIn recently by one of the LinkedIn news editors, and I responded to it, and I was actually connected to her. And she didn't interview me. And this was an article about the hidden job market, which is really relevant for times like now. And I thought, my goodness, she should have interviewed me. You know, I'm actually one of the top 10 LinkedIn experts in the Asia Pacific region, as checked by the Social Media Marketing Institute of Australia. So they do a top 20 list now every year, and I'm in the top 10 for Asia Pac. And considering LinkedIn is not my main gig, I do these other things as well. I'm really excited by that. But anyway, I've lost my train of thought. There's heaps of information online. I think that's plenty from me. Fire your questions at me. Sam, I'm sure you've got something, you know, from the stuff I've sent you that you can pull out. Please do not be thinking that any question is silly. If you don't want your face on the screen and you want to take it off, just turn off the video. You can just put it in the chat. Say you're anonymous if you want to send it to me privately. Just fire away. I'd love to know your questions. And I do hope that one day I can get to New Zealand because it's something that's always been on my bucket list. And I was so hoping I was going to speak at a conference in New Zealand. And I was hoping that would be my excuse to get there. And of course, COVID struck, so I may never get there now.
You just need to talk to Val, because she's a fan of yours, Val O'Reilly. In Auckland, and there's a big membership in Auckland. You started to talk about the hidden job market, and I would actually like to know more about that. As I leap in wildly, guys, seeing as I've muted everybody else. Sorry, but But you can unmute yourselves. Sorry.
And feel free to just stick your hand up. You know, I love that old technology so that we can see that you're interested in asking a question. Okay, so most of us as career development professionals know that up to 90% of jobs are never advertised. So, you know, no news there. But what's going to happen with COVID and any other difficult time is employers or business owners are not going to want to advertise the job because they know that they're going to be inundated with loads of applications from anybody who's just desperate to get work. But what we've seen in Australia and our response to COVID-19 is that the workers from Woolworths supermarkets, the people who lost their jobs in the aviation industry were lined up with jobs in Woolworths supermarkets. And so there's all these sweetheart deals happening. And so if you've got clients who need to find work, they have to go back through their entire career and reconnect with everybody they've ever met, known, you know, liked or whatever. And so they need to connect with all of those people to let those people who they already know that they're available and this is the type of experience they have. They also need to be able to follow all of the companies that they would be interested in working for. Now, I have heard some really, really interesting stories about CEOs who've been hit by COVID-19. Now, one of them now has a job with a squirter bottle of disinfectant going around community venues spraying disinfectant. And he loves it. And he says, please don't tell anyone, but I'm outdoors every day and I get chatting to people in the street and I'm loving it, you know. And so I think what we need to think about is, this is a real context question again. How do you know about these jobs? So, you know, that's a job that's only available through the local council. And if you're not registered with the local council, then you're not going to get access to that type of job. Another person I met is part of a recruitment agency, and he normally provides occupational health and safety training for people in the transport industry. But then, of course, because there's now a construction blitz in Melbourne, because obviously there's not as much traffic on any of the public transport, buses are replacing trains. So now on the weekend, he's monitoring the buses that are replacing the trains. And so if he wasn't part of that recruiting agency who was doing the work in the transport industry, he would never have had that opportunity. And that crowd is never going to advertise that position because they don't want anybody who doesn't really understand the transport industry. So these are just a couple of examples, but you really have to be building your network and you really have to be front of mind, because what employers are doing now is they're asking their employees, who do you know? You know, because when I worked at Westpac, we did a lot of research into the best employees, and they were always friends and family of existing staff members. And you would have seen this trend over the last few years where employees are given remuneration for a successful hire as well. So this feeds into that whole idea. But I also think that if we're thinking about hidden jobs, we have to be really creative, and we have to make the assumption that we're not going to walk in to a 40-hour or 38-hour week job from day one. And we might have to do a little bit of the disinfecting here and a little bit of the supporting the buses over there, and a little bit of something else. And, you know, when things sort of return to some sort of normal, then those other things can come through. And meanwhile, if you've got somebody, because you're COVID free at the moment, is that right?
Relatively. I think we had 2 or 3 new cases today, but they're all the people who are coming in who are theoretically going into quarantine. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So do you have any restrictions? Do you have to keep socially distant or do any of those things?
No, we're back to level 1.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
It is. It's wonderful. We had 7 hard weeks and since then we're okay. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Okay. So if we think about people who are in New Zealand, staying in New Zealand and wanting that next sort of hidden opportunity, then the next thing I would say is they really have to update their LinkedIn profile. They have to have recommendations on it, at least 6, both given and received. They have to have it keyword optimized. They have to talk about their achievements. They have to make it really obvious when the person looks at their LinkedIn profile that they're open to conversation. So feel free to stalk my LinkedIn profile as often as you like. I will be excited if all these New Zealand people start looking at my LinkedIn profile, so I'll not be offended in any way. So I'll share my screen and we'll have a look at my LinkedIn profile, and I'll just highlight some of these things so that you can just get a bit of a sense of what I'm talking about. So I'm not sure how many of you use LinkedIn as a major part of the career development process. I find that it is an excellent way to get a history of what somebody's been doing and actually achieving a result, you know, from the get-go. So all of my sessions start with a bit of a chit-chat and then we're straight into LinkedIn. And even when I'm doing it online, I ask them to change their LinkedIn password and we both log in at the same time. And then as soon as the session's finished, I log out because screen sharing goes too slow. And yeah, we make changes straight away. And I also copy and paste everything I add to their LinkedIn profile in an email so that if they accidentally delete it, which they quite often do, then they can go back to what I've helped, you know, them do in the session. So what I might do is, rather than show you my profile, I'll just run through a couple of things I do with my clients, and then I'll show you, you know, some of the things, because I think you'll find this really helpful. So one of the first things I do is I invite them to change a setting on their browser. And I find LinkedIn works best with a Google Chrome browser. So we just go into settings and we go across to advanced settings, and tell me to slow down if I go too quick, because I've kind of done this thing millions of times, so I sort of speed up a little sometimes. And then you just go to the downloads setting and you slide this bar across here. Ask where to save each file before downloading, because if that is not turned on, it just automatically ends up in their downloads folder in a crazy file called profile, which means nothing, and they can never find it again. So this is why we turn this on first. So after we've done that, I'm just going to move this Zoom thing out of the way. We go back to LinkedIn and we click the More button and we choose Save to PDF. Because as you all know, as soon as you change something on LinkedIn, it's changed. You know, there's no going back. What did I have on there before I started? You know, it's just not there. So we choose Save to PDF. And then I explain that the way they need to save it is with today's date back to front. So it's 15th. And then their name with dashes in between the words, because I do a lot of web development. So you always put dashes between words in file names. And then I get them to write LinkedIn-profile and get them to save it wherever they like on their computer. And that way you've got a record of what the profile looked like before you started. The next thing I do is I invite them to get the full archive of their LinkedIn profile. So if you go into settings and privacy and you choose get a copy of your data, and you choose download the full bit and request the archive and pop the password in. Now, what this will do is it'll invite LinkedIn to prepare those documents. It sends them an email, they click on the link, they download the files. But one of the beautiful things about that is one of those files you can open in Excel and it will be a list of all of your connections. So talking about the hidden they can go through that list of connections and say, oh, I haven't spoken to Bill in 5 years. Bill knows everything. It's time to reconnect with Bill. But, you know, sitting here going through a list on your screen is just like, oh, you know. But if you want to print out your list and it's not that many, well, you know, this can be really, really helpful. And also, in the unlikely event you're a naughty person on LinkedIn, they will delete your profile without warning. So at least if you have this backup, that's going to help you as well. Okay, so the next thing is there's loads of changes in settings and so on and so forth that I do, but I'll just focus on the main things because I can see there's a couple of questions waiting and I want to make sure I get to all questions. That's way more important than what I've got to say. So if we go to the individual profile, the number one thing that you must insist that all of your clients do is change their URL up the top here. So LinkedIn gives you one that's your name dash last name dash numbers and letters. You must change this, because what that does is it optimizes your name in Google search results, as well as look much neater on your resume. And that means that if an employer Googles you before the interview or before offering a job, which is guaranteed, your profile will come up. So they definitely need to change that. I also make sure their photo is publicly available, and I make sure everything else down there is turned on. So that's the number one, no questions asked, we'll always do first up.
So you're absolutely right that an employer will Google you. A colleague and I did some research about 3 years ago, and 89% of employers would Google you, and of those 89%, almost all of them would go to LinkedIn as opposed to anywhere else. They only about 2/3 of them worried about Facebook.
Yeah.
It's Nicola here. I also seen a fascinating thing this afternoon when I was working with a client, a very large employer here in Ellson. As part of their application process, they actually, as well as asking permission for pre-medical and drug screening and things like that, they actually seek permission to do a social media check. And I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, look, social media is playing a much bigger part in everything. And the interesting thing is that McDonald's now allows you to complete a Snapplication, which means you can apply for a job at McDonald's through Snapchat. And so, you know, as career development practitioners, we need to be aware of the new ways that people are hiring as well. So, you know, LinkedIn is just one component of this whole process. And, you know, that's why I'm rewriting my LinkedIn book. I'm rewriting it in a different way. It's called LinkedIn for Me and My Career or Business. And I want to talk about a lot of the mobile phone features, because there's, like, you can do an audio recording of your name. You know, there's lots of little sneaky things now that are going to determine whether you're perceived, and this is particularly for your older clients, as digitally competent. Now, you may have heard the term digitally literate, and all that means is you've got a LinkedIn profile. But digital competency will be a way that people look at you and they can say, this person has got their head around technology. They're using emojis, they put in videos, they're updating regularly, they've got good recommendations, they've, you know, given recommendations out, they've got endorsements for their top skills. You know, all of this is showing digital competency. And that's where we need to get our clients and ourselves to make sure that, you know, it's not the plumber's plumbing. My plumbing is good because this is what I do. And so I make sure, you know, that's that. So, yeah, great point. And thank you for referencing that. It's really, really, really important that you do have that. The other thing is too, that you can't assume that if you have all the privacy settings on your social, that people won't be able to see your, you know, rogue Facebook profile. Because if someone is your friend and they're connected to the employer, then that person can still see your stuff. So, you know, you've got to be aware that anything you publish online is basically public. You can't assume that it's not. So, yeah. And by the way, all of you are welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn as well. I'll happily accept invitation requests. We'll have a look at these questions before I move on, because I do want to make sure that I get to those. Okay. Can you discuss more about keyword optimization? Absolutely. Big LinkedIn user, career work in the UK. Great. And is changing careers. How do you brand yourself? Right. Okay. So there is an article I've written, which is again, #1, page 1 of Google search results. And LinkedIn articles are a great way to get, if you optimize them, search results. Primary and secondary keywords, LinkedIn. Voila. Now, this article helps you understand where to find them, because as career development practitioners, you have some ideas. Here in Australia, we have a website called myfuture.edu.au, which details all sorts of jobs. If you want to log into that and have a look, just pretend you live in Melbourne or some Australian postcode, not New Zealand, and you will be able to create an account there. Okay, and this is a way for you to determine your primary keywords and your secondary keywords. And so, yeah, this article goes into all of that. So maybe I'll just pop that link in the chat. And also, if you don't already know, you can save all the content from the chat just by clicking the 3 dots in that chat box window, and it will bring it down for you. So the other thing is, it's not just about knowing the keywords. You've also got to know where to put the keywords. So I'll write that in. The number 1 spot is the headline. The number 2 spot is your current job. The number 3 spot is your previous job. And then it goes on from there. So anything that's in experience, you know, as in the details, and there's no particular order here. And obviously, I'm giving you these answers based on experience. I don't have proof from LinkedIn, but I have loads of experience that says this is where it's really, really important. In the summary, which is now called about, in the education, in voluntary experience, you know, like you name it, everywhere else, certifications, publications, you know, whatever. Now, the headline is the most important thing. Now, I don't know how many of your clients say open to opportunities or open to work, as the new phrase, you know, is on LinkedIn. That is a complete waste of your headline. And years ago, because I do so many different things, how do I give myself a label? Like if I meet you at a networking event and I say I'm a plumber, you know I'm a plumber. But I do lots of stuff. But I have to give myself a label which is aligned with what I want to achieve online. So I've decided that my label is independent LinkedIn specialist, because LinkedIn is a word that people remember. Specialist is my level of competency. Independence is my unique positioning point. I don't want to be thought of as an employee of LinkedIn, because I'm not, and I've never worked for them. But then all my additional keywords come after that. Now, originally, you only get extra keywords if you had an iPhone, but now LinkedIn has opened up that box and you can put in more words in there. So any word that says, interested in fascinating roles in the field of, you know, like none of those words are keywords. And so you are not going to appear in search results with those kind of words in your headline. So every single word in my headline is a word that I'd want to be found for. And then I've also put in a dancer, because I'm 55 years old and I don't know what it's like in New Zealand, but a woman of a certain age is assumed to be dead, I think, in a lot of fields. So I want people to know I am alive and kicking. And so that's why I've got that little dancer emoji on there. And yeah, so, you know, let people choose what little emoji. And one girl, she loved food and pizzas, so she actually put a pizza emoji on there, and I thought that was kind of cute. And, you know, there's all sorts of emojis. You just pick one that you think relates to you. And what that does is it makes you memorable. So that's your number 1 spot for keyword. And what you'll see is in my current job is, well, come on screen, I've got that LinkedIn specialist again, and then more keywords. So my profile has been optimized for 2 main words, LinkedIn and trainer. So wherever you see the word LinkedIn and trainer, you know that Sue's, you know, doing something to optimize her LinkedIn. I can't just put in my headline and all these titles, LinkedIn, 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 you know, because I'll look like an idiot. So I obviously spread those words out and put them all the way through. Now, in terms of changing careers, so some people right now are not working. And if their experience ended in February, there's a big problem, because the algorithm favours people who have a current job. So if you've got a client who's not working, you need to say as a job, so you just add in an extra job, and you say career research, and you describe what sort of work they're looking for. So I might say, I want to be writer, editor, you know, whatever I want to be in my new role. And then I can go into details, and I started it in March because my other job ended in February, and then I'll add in all the details and say, I'm now interested in becoming a full-time writer. I'm looking for commissions. I'm looking for writing opportunities, big, small, or, you know, infrequent or frequent contracts, whatever. And then I can go into details. So the 3 things that determine your brand on LinkedIn are your photo, your headline, and your summary. And obviously this position here, which you go into detail about. So the other thing I would do for my client, if they were changing careers, sorry, I'm going to try and close this without closing Zoom, is I would change the summary. Now you can see here on my summary that as soon as you open LinkedIn, you can see this information here. And that's really, really clear as to why I'm here, because most people will not scroll down. They'll only look at what they see up the top. And if they're not sold on what's up the top, they're not going to scroll down. And people are also click resistant. So even though my email address and phone number is in the contact info, I have it in that top part of my profile, because people have heard about me and they want to reach out to me. I want to make it as easy as possible. And if they're looking at me on an Android phone, these will actually be clickable links, and they can, you know, message me or SMS or call me immediately. And my phone doesn't ring endlessly, because there's so much content here that people think, oh God, you know. And I use this expression with my clients. When you walk past a house and there's a real estate signboard on there for sale, do you feel compelled to pick up your phone and call the real estate agent because you saw a mobile phone number there? You know, like nobody does. They just think, well, I don't need the house. I don't need to call the real estate agent. So this is why I have mine publicly available. But that said, if I'm working with a client who's been a victim of domestic violence or has been stalked or something like that, then obviously there's never any identifying information. The photograph, you cannot determine the face by facial recognition. There's lots of other things I do for that type of client. But for the average punter who wants to be out there, who wants to change their career and wants opportunities to come to them, they have to change their headline. And it doesn't even matter if they're not in the job already. You know, if they've never done writing before, it was just a hobby, they can still put that in the headline. And I did this with a really amazing young man who was very unique. His dad was fabulous. He was a vet from the country, but his son was in Box Hill, which is not far from here, and was living on his own, and his girlfriend left him, and he was a bit anxious. You know, it was a really interesting thing. Anyway, I was running a little 5-person LinkedIn workshop, and his dad said, I want to pay for him to come and see you, Sue. And I said, look, I think it would be best if he came to the workshop first and then did his homework and then came back to see me individually. Whatever you say, Sue, I trust you. I said, okay. So this guy, I can't remember his name, sorry, he came to the workshop, and it was really interesting to observe the behaviour of the group, because the other people in the group were a little bit older than him, and they were like protective of him and trying to support him and encourage him. It was beautiful to see. So he came away, he's beaming, and he was just so excited about his future prospects. And what he'd done is he'd done this accounting course, and he got an internship at a private accounting practice, and they couldn't cope with him. So they sacked him as well. So he had all this stuff about he wasn't worthwhile, and he was, you know, it was really tough. But he came to this little workshop, and all these people were really admiring of his skills. And so what we called him was an aspiring accountant, A-S-P-I-R-I-N-G, accountant. So of course he came up in all the accountant search queries. And of course, within weeks, he had a job and he was off and extremely happy, and, you know, it was all a very, very happy ending. So as a career development practitioner, we need to help our clients come up with these words that will help describe them, that they feel comfortable with. And a lot of Australians find it really, really difficult to talk positively about themselves. They're all right talking positively about somebody else. There was another client I had recently, and I think this is her profile. And she was really anxious about, oh no, it wasn't her. See if I can find hers, just so you can get a sense. No. might have to get back to you on that. Anyway, she was a really interesting woman, and yeah, she'd lost a lot of confidence, and I came up with some, you know, really snazzy educational technologist, because she loved education and she loved technology. So I gave her this title of educational technologist. She'd been working in the government and it was very boring, and she just loved those words. So I think that that's another skill as career development practitioners we can help people with.
Mm.
Yeah.
So what led you to write the book Gigsters? Because I know I've had a brief look at the 3 before that,
Yeah.
and they're all very practical. But what actually shaped you to write the book?
Yeah, mostly because of my experience of not having a normal job and being ridiculed by it by many people. My family still expect me to go out and get a real job. My friends who've got real jobs, I use the quote real jobs in quotation marks, never understood me, and I really feel that this is a viable choice for the future for all ages. People who retired, you know, they end a career of 40, 50 years, whatever, where they've been working every day, and then they have to retire, and they don't want to retire. You know, they want time to do this and time to do that. And one guy who was retired says, "Oh, Sue, I'm so glad you've used the word gigster," because he says, now I don't have to say I'm retired. He says, I can say I'm a gigster, because he was still doing this at Rotary and this at, you know, some recruitment firm he sold off and they brought him back. And, you know, there was all these other things that he could do. So gigster was this term that people could use. And I guess this was a little bit inspired as well by my first website, which is called newcomersnetwork.com, because when you move, you're in transition. And you're in transition for a minimum of 3 years, whether you like it or not. But it passes, and you're no longer a newcomer. And I love this concept of people being able to be who they are. And there's a cartoonist here in Australia called Michael Leunig, and he's very philosophical. And I went to a live event where he was interviewed, and he said, you should be your own kind of peculiar. And I was just so inspired by that, because the people who I find most interesting and I love working with are themselves. They're not some cookie cutter version of what society expects them to be. And I really wish people would value even people who are unemployed, or who only do part-time work, or who can only do this because of their context, because of whatever limitations they have. And so I wanted the general community to understand this is a viable alternative, and I wanted the people who were choosing it to feel validated, you know, by that experience. And thank you, Sam. It's a great question. I hadn't really thought about it, but now that you're asking me, you know, I guess that was really my motivation. And I've included in this book poetry as well, as a way of summarising things, because I think sometimes through rhyme and creative expression that we can reach people in a different way. So every chapter ends with a poem as well. And I've written it as a conversation, as if I was with the person and we were discussing things, you know, in a normal career environment. Yeah.
Yeah, and thank you for being so generous and sharing your books. Would you be, thank you for allowing them to be downloaded from ResearchGate as well. That's a very useful place to be going. Yes. So for those of you who've got a ResearchGate account, you can go in and download Sue's book. And if you don't, then ask me, because I downloaded them, if Sue's okay with me sharing those.
And also, you don't even need to have a ResearchGate.
Right, you can just click in. Okay.
You can just click and get them from that as well.
Nice.
And that's my way of responding to the COVID, you know, pandemic, to give them away. And yeah, I like being able to share what I do. So yeah. And to that point about poetry, my next 2 books after the revised LinkedIn one will be called Poems for Lovers to Read to Each Other, and poems for me to truly be. Because one of the things, I've lived on my own now, well, my children left last year, but with them, but on my own technically for 15 years. And one of the things that you miss when you live on your own is conversation. And when you have children, you read to them, but as adults, we don't read to one another. And more, we're all in front of our screens. And I really miss the sound of voice. And so I thought, how can I encourage people to talk to one another? And I thought, well, maybe the bedroom will motivate them to do it, you know. And so that's why it's Poems for Lovers, to read to each other, which is a lot of fun. And then I thought, but what about the people who don't have someone to read? And even if you're in a relationship, I really believe you need to, you know, understand yourself. So the other one, my grandmother had a saying, which was always really and truly. So it's, this concept is to truly be. So another part of career development work is helping people understand where they're at and what they need to do and be themselves. And so, yeah, I'm really looking forward to finishing those off as well.
Sorry, I really liked your comment about context. I thought that was actually really helpful. And I think in New Zealand, while we have some understanding of context, we don't use the idea of context often enough. We usually do when we're working with individuals, but our vocational rehabilitation in New Zealand tends to be more focused on what might be as opposed to what's actually available.
Yeah, and look, if you're a parent and you can only work school hours and you have to take some crappy job that is available either during school hours or after school hours for a few years, what's the problem with that? But, you know, our society seems to ridicule that as a valid reason for doing it. I mean, you need to pay the bills. And so you pay the bills. And then when the opportunity comes for you to reignite that other opportunity, you can. And there's another sense of this context. I was working with this American woman who had a high-flying, fantastic PR career in New York. And she'd married an Australian. It was his second marriage, and she was obviously younger than him. And so then she had another 2 kids. So the dad's got like 4 kids or 6 kids. I don't know how many kids he's got. And she's here in leafy Canterbury of Melbourne. And it kind of wasn't enough after living in New York and being in PR. And her husband realised this as an Australian, and he knew that I'd worked with a lot of Australians who've returned to Australia. And he said, I think she needs to talk to you. So she came along to see me, and at last, he was somebody who understood how she felt, which was the first thing, because I'd worked with so many repats. And the second was I helped her understand that her life, it may be kind of boring, but there was still all this other opportunity that she wasn't exploring. And I suggested to her in the appointment, is there anything else that you've always wanted to do? She says, I've always wanted to do graphic design. And I just let it go through to the keeper. I didn't make any big deal about it. You know, I just let her plant her own seed. And then she messages me, I don't know, about 2 months later, oh, Sue, my life is fantastic. I had this idea that I could do a graphic design course, and I've started the course and I've met these amazing people and I'm really loving it. And I'm so glad I've stayed in Australia. So what is really happening is we have to understand our clients, what is missing from their lives. And for her, it was intellectual stimulation. She needed to have something that would keep her mind active and engaged. So despite all the wonderful comforts of living in this beautiful suburb where I live, it wasn't enough. And so her context was quite different to how we think of somebody with a disability or somebody with caring responsibilities or somebody who's had an injury. Another story I can tell you is obviously there's a lot of aviators who are now no longer working. And there's 2 aviators that I've met. The first one was a really, really interesting guy who came along to one of my courses at the CAE, the Centre for Adult Education. And he came in, he's looking like he's got long hair with a grey streak and black boots and sparkles all over his jacket. I mean, he was like nothing else. And he says, I'm an illusionist, you know, magician, one of those stage people who goes up and, you know, does magic tricks. I said, oh, that's interesting. And he says, yeah. And everybody asks me, how did I get into this career? And I have to go through the same old story again of telling that I was a Qantas pilot and I had a back injury and blah, 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 and I'm sick of telling that story. And I said, look, all you've got to do is tell your story online the way you want it once, and then you won't ever have to tell that story again. And I think this is another thing that people forget. But, you know, if he'd just written the damn story down, he wouldn't be asked this all the time, and he could live his new truth. And once the story was down, he was free to leave the story behind and to be all the other things, not just an illusionist. He was also an artist and a creative, and he had all these other things that were part of what he was doing. And so another person I met, she came to one of my workshops that I did at the local council, and she was, you know, I could tell she was smart. Well, it turns out she was an aircraft pilot as well. And she's now teaching aviation safety, so she's still got a job in aviation, but she's always loved to write. And so now she's set up a website for erotic fiction to invite women to have some of their own time and subscribe to this erotic fiction website. We were on the phone, I kid you not, for over an hour yesterday, because I've started writing erotic fiction as well, just to, you know, throw another thing in the trunk. And we're just having this amazing conversation, because my dad worked for Ellson Airlines, which was a previous aviation company in Australia. Yes. So, of course, we just talk like this because, you know, I'm like an Ansett baby, or automatically understand aviation because of my dad's career, which is another thing I talk about when I talk to career clients. What did your parents do? Because they often forget that they've learnt by osmosis all those things that their parents did. And sometimes this gives them permission to do something that was similar, or not do something that was similar. So again, it's all part of that career exploration and understanding. Well, my dad says like another client, sorry, I'm going to get waylaid and I'll go off on multiple tangents here, but this amazing woman I met, she'd set up a dance studio in South Africa, and she was brilliant in technology and all these things, but she couldn't have children. And her parents had told her that you would only be successful if you're a doctor or a lawyer. And she felt that she was a complete failure because she couldn't have children and because she wasn't a doctor or a lawyer. And I just couldn't believe this story. I thought, how is that possible? That, like, she's amazing. So I helped her get a job in childcare, and, you know, which is what she had always wanted. And then she came back to me. She says, Sue, thank you. It was amazing. But now I want to teach. I said, oh, okay. So we got her a job in teaching. She says, Sue, I've done enough for that. I want to do something else now. And it's just amazing to me that as career development practitioners, if we understand our clients and we connect with them, they'll come back and they'll be ready to explore their career even further over time. And that's a really special privilege to see clients over multiple years. And that Jan I told you about, I told her, you're coming back from overseas 25 years, you need to get your life in order first. So for the first year, she ended up in a job working at an international school with a lot of Indian students, because she'd never had a child, and these students were all the age that would have been if she'd had children. And she loved Indians because she'd lived in India. And then she got promoted because she was so amazing. And then she was involved in a startup that built co-working spaces across the whole of Australia. So she was in the entrepreneurial space for many years. And then she says, Sue, I don't want to do that anymore. I said, I remember, Jan, you telling me that you lived in the country. She said, yes, I did. I said, would you like to live in the country? She said, yes, I would. And so we found a voluntary job. She got the voluntary job in the country, so she would commute up to the country to begin with. And then, of course, she moved, and she still was doing a part-time job in the city. And then she said, Sue, I believe in tiny homes, and that's what I want to do now. So for the first time in her life, she now has her own home in country Victoria. And, you know, to be part of someone's life and enable them to do that kind of thing, yeah, it's better than writing, let me tell you. Yeah.
She sounds like a serial entrepreneur.
Oh, she is, absolutely, absolutely. But, you know, she didn't give herself permission to be that when she first came back. Now, Eleanor's asked me a great question. Is there a certain type of individual that the gigster lifestyle works for? Well, let me tell you who it doesn't work for. It doesn't work for people who like routine, consistency, reliability, income on a regular basis, and so on. It has to be somebody who has a fortitude of strength that is not necessarily a risk taker, but is somebody who has the courage to take risks. Now, as an ex-banker, I'm kind of risk averse, as in I won't put my money into something, but I will take risks, but I'll always take measured risks. So it needs to be somebody who's prepared to do that. It needs to be somebody who is prepared to cope with uncertainty of not knowing what's around the corner, not knowing what happened today, not knowing where the next dollar's coming from. A lot of people can't cope with that. So it needs to be that. I think it's really well suited to people who are set up financially, who want to experiment and try a few different things. I think it's really fantastic for young people because they don't want 9 to 5. A lot of young people want lifestyle. And I call being a gigster a work style. So it sort of combines life and work, you know, together. And so, yeah, what's work and what's life, it's kind of all blended, but in a way that's aligned with your values. Yeah. So, yeah, that would be it.
I think I've been doing that for many years.
Perfect. And so that's another thing that we need to say. This is a good choice.
Stephen, I was just thinking that's what you're doing now. You're supposed to be retired. Hang on, I'll just unmute you.
That's it.
Oh, yep. Sorry, I muted you. Apologies. Trying to unmute you, it's not working. Sorry, Stephen. Yep.
Right. Okay. Hi. This is really fascinating. Yeah, I suppose in a way, well, I guess I see it that I've got a portfolio career. Yes. So having finished full-time employment about 4 years ago, what have I got? I've got 1, 2, 3. I've got about 4 or 5 strands to my life. Some of them pay money, some of them don't.
Yeah.
One of those strands is as a student. One of them or 2 of them are voluntary.
Yeah.
And 2 streams that are employment based.
Right.
That deliver a small amount of money.
Yeah.
And of course, the other strand, which I'm very grateful, is this wonderful government of ours that pays people over 65, which is amazing. But I think the point about being paid at 65 is the point you made about trying things is actually there's a small amount of income there that means that you can actually try things. You know, you don't have to work 40 hours a week. Work for pay for 40 hours, should I say.
Well, the fascinating story that I often tell people is the first 5 years after I left my husband, I survived on an average taxable income of $26,000 a year. And, you know, some years up to 80% of my income went on rent. So I found a way to manage. I always had food. I always had chocolate. We still always went out. And we'd say we were going for fish and chips. Or as you say in New Zealand, fish and chops.
Fish and chops, yes.
I don't know, something else. Everybody makes a joke about it. But we wouldn't have the fish. We just have the chips. So, you know, there's ways to enjoy life. And my daughter, who I thought didn't really think anything I did was correct, she said, Mum, when I have kids, I'm going to do what you did. And every night after dinner, we're going to go for a walk. Because as soon as we started walking, the kids would start talking. And I thought, isn't that interesting? We never went every night. But in her mind, we did. And we had this closeness because, you know, we did go walking after dinner. So we would still travel, but on the bus. You know, we got involved in Scouts, so all I had to provide was the sleeping bags, not the tents, not the camping equipment, you know, just I volunteered at 2 jamborees and 1 cubbaree, which are huge events. The Scout Jamboree is 2 weeks. It costs thousands of dollars for me to go and my kids to go, but I still paid for those. And I had the most amazing experiences. So back to Stephen's point about voluntary work is a huge component of who I am as an individual. And I've had the most amazing experiences because of some of my voluntary work. So this is what is also, you know, the whole Gigs to Lifestyle. There's a chapter in the book about money management. Because if you're going to take this path, you've got to be able to manage your money. And there's an artist I met, and he said, everybody wants to know, how can you survive as an artist? And he says, bank everything you earn. But a lot of artists don't do that. As soon as they get the money in, they spend it, and then they're screwed, and then, you know, they're on the street. And I'm very much like that too. I save everything. Naomi had to go. Thanks, Naomi. And thanks, Sam. Yes, very good. Any other questions? I think we must have gone nearly over the hour, sorry. But I'm happy to stay. So if you want to keep going, that's fine.
I just wanted to make a comment about the activities that you've talked about that you undertook with your family when things were tough. And I've just been doing some research around mental health for a seminar we're going to be doing. And they had a range of, they put a range of activities. Some of you will know the 5 ways to wellbeing. And they had a checklist of activities. And I went through those, and the vast majority of those activities you could do with almost no expenditure.
Right.
So, you know, it was just, I think it, particularly in these times we're living in, and where more and more people are going to become financially stretched and challenged, that actually there's a whole lot of stuff you can do that actually, you know, will keep you sustained, and you'll grow in that. And come close to the people you love.
Absolutely. And the best thing about, I say the 3 main ways to get work when you have any level of disadvantage are through networking, referrals, and voluntary work. And so I've made some amazing contacts and connections through my voluntary work. And I went to, can you believe it, a conference called the Unemployment Conference here in Australia. And I couldn't believe they called it that. And apart from that, they had all these people get up on the bandwagon and say, this is what you need to do for people who are unemployed. And I've just put a link in the chat because I came home and I bashed out this article because I was furious. Because the whole point, like there was this one woman who came along and said, oh, you know, I did this and I did this, and now I've got a house and I've got this fabulous car and we travelled overseas. And I'm thinking, you've got it all completely wrong. And everybody was in awe of this woman who had achieved all this material success. And yet nobody was, I had 3 people turn up at my workshop on LinkedIn, which was about massaging the message. Because if you don't present the right story, then people will ignore you, right? And I thought, everybody was raving about she had material success, and nobody was talking about, well, how did they get the job, you know? And then I thought, there's actually been lots of benefits to being unemployed, and we should be discussing these things, and we should help people understand that they're still human and they've still got a contribution they can make. And getting out of bed every day and going somewhere and doing something is enormously beneficial. So feel free to check that one out. But the first edition I wrote, I showed it to my accountability partner, and she told me, Sue, you're not allowed to publish that. I was so angry. So that's version 2. That was slightly more restrained.
Are there any more questions for Sue? Because I'm very conscious that we've taken an hour of her time, and apologies for me being late. I got the wrong link and sent Sue the wrong link. So, any other questions? Go, Eleanor. Unmute yourself.
Yes.
Hover your mouse over the. Yep.
I wasn't sure if I was allowed to do that. So, well, in terms of LinkedIn,
Maria too, yep.
So your book covers your advice and expert tips, etc., as how to develop your profile and somebody else, is that right? Plus you run trainings as well, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Are they online or are they in person?
I do all sorts. So I run a 2-hour workshop called LinkedIn for Business for the local council. And so what I do is I produce a Word document which has loads of links in it. And I let that go out to the participants before the workshop, so they've got that and they can print it off. And then we go through it in the online presentation. So they get lots of tips, and I link to local resources and all that kind of stuff. So I tailor every presentation I do. I also do in-class workshops. I do individual consultations. I do small groups, normally here in my office here. So it just depends on whatever it is. And I do a lot of work in schools. And I believe that, do you have 12 years of secondary school, primary and secondary? Is it 12 years in New Zealand or 13?
13.
13. I thought it was 13. So in your case, it would be in year 12 rather than year 13. And here I say year 11 instead of year 12. But I believe every student should have a LinkedIn profile before they leave school. And they're too busy in the last year of school. So they really need to do it in year 12 in New Zealand. And then they need to connect to all their friends and, you know, so that they don't lose contact, because those people are their network, and so that they can become part of that alumni. So I encourage schools to have at least 80% of their students on LinkedIn and connected to the school forever before they leave the school. And so I do a lot of work in the school space as well. So if you look at sueellson.com/publications, you'll see a whole bunch of stuff that I've written, and there's articles there on LinkedIn for schools and, you know, LinkedIn marketing for alumni and, you know, all sorts of stuff. So feel free to browse through that and you'll get a sense. You'll also see on there my podcasts, my presentations, you know, I do international stuff, all sorts of things. So yeah, flexible. And as I said, this next LinkedIn book will be designed for people who are a little bit tentative about the online world. And you might think that young people are really good at the online world, but they're actually not, because they don't have our wisdom. So they don't know what to say. They know how to use it, but they don't know what to say and how to make it work for them. So that's another part of what I do when I teach. So I say that you can teach an old dog new tricks, only one trick at a time, and you can teach you can teach a wise person to be digital, but you can't teach a digital person to be wise, right? So when you understand this concept, you've got to help the younger person, you know, ask these questions. Because when I went to school, the example that I use, particularly for my older students and clients, is when I went to school, we started with pencils. And we knew that the pencil was made of wood and it had graphite, and the teacher would have those really fast sharpeners on the desk, and, you know, you would use that sharpener and lose half your pencil. But, you know, we knew everything about a pencil. And then we'd get a pen license only after practice. We were not allowed to use a pen full time until we got our pen license. And we knew that a pen was, you know, made of plastic and it had a hole in it for the air and a ball point. And if it didn't work, you had to swirl it around. But we knew everything about that jolly pen before we were allowed to use it. And now what happens is, as soon as a child can focus, we just shove a device in front of them. They don't know anything. They don't know it's got a battery, you know, and they just press it until something happens. And so these older clients and older students, they're too scared to press a button or to try anything because, well, I don't know, it's not a pen, and I don't know how it works, and, you know, something might happen and I'll lose everything. And so they're terrified of it. So when I explain that story, is our era of people, we were taught the why first. But this era is taught to just give things a go.
The what?
Just the why. It's what, yeah, it's the what. Perfect example, Sam. So we have to sort of bring these two together and help people understand the what and the why. Yeah.
So I've just got a quick question before I go. I've got a client that's raising her online presence, and it's because she's setting up a small business here in Ellson. And one of the things that we've been doing in some of our one-on-ones is looking at the LinkedIn. Now, I'm no way a LinkedIn specialist, although I have been on there for a while. So I really thank you for some of the tips today. But I just wondered if she wanted to book some time with you on a one-on-one, are you up for that?
Absolutely. What I'll do is I'll also attach, if I can, the file. Do you have the add a file option on your screen set?
I don't think so, no. I'm just having a look myself.
That
No.
must be information of your Zoom account.
Yeah.
Look, I'll flick it through to Sam. I've got the LinkedIn for Business workbook. And you can have a flick through that and see that. You'll get a bit of a sense of what it is. But yes, I'm more than happy to do one-on-ones. And I do international clients, Canada, the US, UK, all sorts of countries, the Middle East, all the time. So, yeah.
Awesome. Oh, thank you. And see you later, everybody. I'm going to shoot off now.
Good night, Nicola.
Bye.
Kia ora.
Now, what I normally do in my trainings, if anybody else is willing to stay, is I always ask what's been most helpful to you today. And I find it's a really great way to summarise and to get everybody to contribute, but also a way for everybody else to reflect on, different things that people found helpful. So if you're open to that, I'd love to hear from you.
Can I just ask Sue quickly what your charge is for a one-on-one?
Yeah, I normally charge 400 Australian dollars, including GST, for 2 hours. Anybody who comes by referral, I take $50 off. And I also am operating on a pay what you can afford basis. So if the person is currently unemployed, I will accept as low as $100 for the 2 hours.
Do you do small group sessions, Sue?
I do. The rate for that is normally $500 per hour of training time. But depending on who it is, I do the workshops for the council for $450. So again, if the budget is X, I'm flexible. I don't want people to miss out, but I don't want to be so cheap that people don't understand my value.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we're very grateful for you giving us this time today. It's been really, really good. Sorry, I've interrupted. Go. So other people talk about what was valuable.
What was most helpful? Just stick your hand up if you want to go next.
I just have to say that I'm a Luddite and I find it terrifying.
Oh, really?
So I'm going, the thing I've recognised is I'm going to have to upskill. And actually, it's like you're going to have to eat really horrible food or something. It isn't something that I think, can't wait, it's really interesting. I think I've got to grind my way through this technology.
No.
So what I've got out of it is, come on, kid, get up with the play.
Yeah. Look, it won't happen overnight, but it will happen. Look, allow yourself a minimum of 2 years. And I say this to people, if they're going to change their career, they say, Sue, I don't know. And I said, it'll take 2 years. And the reason I say that to people, they think, that's too long. I need it in the next 6 weeks. Well, you're not going to be able to achieve it in the next 6 weeks. That's just not realistic. So often we overestimate what we can do in a short time and we underestimate what we can do in a long time. And if you felt that you had to do all this in 6 weeks, you wouldn't do any of it because it would just be too much. But if you say, over the next 2 years, I'm going to spend an hour a week and I'm going to learn something new, good enough.
Fair enough.
Or a group of us could get together and hire Sue and do a small group thing later.
It sounds like a grand idea.
Yes.
The thing to do is to do your own LinkedIn profile first. Because you're telling your clients to do it and you don't have yours done, you're going to look pretty silly.
At a team meeting, it didn't quite work very well.
Yeah, we did.
Absolutely hopeless. But see, that was a fantastic presentation, and I guess just reflecting the question I asked, I didn't actually realise that you could actually manipulate LinkedIn for those that are actually wanting to change careers and just using that word optimization. Fantastic.
Thank you. Good. I'm glad you got some value out of that. Excellent.
A whole lot was great.
Yeah, it was. Thank you. Sorry, I was a bit negative with my response. It was fantastic.
Oh, look, Marlene, it's fabulous to hear. I was working with this Italian academic who is 69, and I suggested to her that she might need to think, because she wants to do counselling in the future, she might need to think that some jobs may not be accessible to her after 70. Oh, but I want to work until I'm 75. And I was thinking of working in aged care. And I said, look, well, because of COVID-19, if you're over 70, you can't work in aged care. And I said, have you seen a financial planner? No. So she has just assumed her whole life that she's going to work at this university till she's 75, and she spends every cent she earns. And she's never had financial planning advice. And she kept saying to me in our conversation, Sue, you've scared me. And I'm thinking, like, yeah. So, Nolene, you're not alone. There are other people out there who are scared, and I'm sure they're even more underprepared than you are. So,
yeah, it's not so much I'm scared. I just don't find it
not attractive.
Yeah.
So you can't live in this world without technology now, and you've got to, I've got to go there. But it's like I've got to go there. It's not like, oh, that's really interesting. I'm very curious about this.
Well, I've wasted 2 hours of my life on TikTok. Oh my God! Because I teach social media, so I have to look at these stupid things, and I thought, oh, if that's what I have to do, I'm screwed. Because, I do not want to use TikTok. But I'm on there. So, look, I hear what you're saying, and I'm in technology all the time. One thing I can guarantee you about technology is you have to decide what you want to use it for and only use that technology. Skip the rest. Because there's so much noise out there. And if somebody said, I went to a workshop one day and they said I was supposed to tweet 6 times a day.
You and Donald Trump.
Well, how often are you supposed to put a post on LinkedIn then?
Okay. In the LinkedIn for Business workshop, I say, and you're trying to get business, once a week.
Natasha, you put your hand up just before.
Yeah, I was just going to say thank you. So I found you very inspirational. I'm in a career change at the moment. And so you saying it's going to take a couple of years makes me feel a bit better, because occasionally I just think, what am I doing? This is, all too hard. Trying to get my head around the technology. I'm been on a massive learning curve. I've been grateful for our 2 weeks break, because I've really felt by the end of last semester that my brain was just going to explode with all the information that I'm getting. But it is good. It is exciting.
Yes.
But yeah, it's great learning all about it. So thank you.
You're welcome. Look, as an avid learner myself, I can't stand those presentations. Oh, that's in my book. What did they say? Well, if we think about this from a variety of perspectives, and then if we talk about what happened before and what's going to happen next, and then if we think about, well, what would happen in New Zealand, and then they get to the point, please just get to the damn point. So yeah, I try and make sure in my presentations that everything I say gives some kind of information or helps the story be told. So that's my technique. So yeah, thank you. It's great feedback.
For me, there are a couple of things. One of them was your use of the label context. I've done similar things with clients, but I've never really seen it in its context, and I think that's great. And I will certainly borrow that and use it. And the other thing I think was the inspiration to actually look at my profile as a way of actually attracting people, which is something that you had mentioned, getting people coming to you rather than going hustling, and that appeals to me. So
excellent.
That's That'll be motivation. Thank you.
You're welcome. Eunice, did you have a question, or you were just... Oh, she's
No,
saying
I think she's saying goodbye. Leslie, you've got a question though.
Yeah, hi, Sue. I just want to make comment about, for me, places for your keywords. So the idea of using your headline to use your keywords, just brilliant. Yeah, so thank you very much for that tip.
And also, always start with the label, then
Right.
the words, and then something about the person. That's my sequence. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. I think that's everyone. Sam, what did you find most helpful?
Interestingly, it was the definition of gigster that you gave that actually just made me rethink the fact that I am too. I am also a gigster. That I hadn't actually put myself in the bucket. I found the book really interesting, but I hadn't actually thought about myself in there until you reframed that. And I think that, yeah, I've been attracted to that for a long time. Eleanor, were you going to say something?
Oh, yeah, just a bit that I found really useful was the career, how to manage a career break in LinkedIn in terms of phrasing it as career research, and the fact of how the algorithm works. So it's really important to make sure you've got a really current date up there.
Yeah. Eleanor, that's a really good point you make. And one of the things I talk about, particularly with women of childbearing age, is if a guy takes time off to look after the kids, oh, isn't he amazing? Isn't that wonderful that dad is taking off the time to look after his children, you know, and everybody thinks he's a hero. And if a woman does that, I call us muffin cookers, at home cooking muffins, right? That's what they think of us. And it's no good because, you know, we didn't lose our brains. In fact, I thought I was really good at my job at Westpac. And then I became a mother and I thought I was slacking off because, you know, when you become a parent, you become so much more efficient. Like what you thought was important as a childless person is completely different to what you think is important when you become a parent, right? But I still knew that as a woman, I would be perceived as a muffin cooker. So, and that's my personal expression. It's not some scientific career research comment. It's just, you know, my expression. So what you'll see on my profile, and I believe in going all the way back to the beginning. If people don't want me because I'm 55, they can get stuffed. I don't care, you know. We're not a fit if they don't want me because I'm that age. But beginning of my career, unless I wanted to get back into banking, I've summarised that fairly briefly. But obviously, when I moved to Melbourne and I was raising my children and doing lots of other things, for 6 years and 11 months, I've grouped the whole lot together. So I don't have 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, you know, 2 months gap, you know, have to put in maternity leave or parental leave or whatever you want to call it now. All I did was I just grouped the whole lot together and I put big name companies on here. Now, that was the crowd who sacked me. That was a day here, a day there. That was a contract that was initially, I think, for 2 months that got extended. Parks and Gardens was 6 weeks. Ansett was 4 weeks. My dad was so excited that I got a job at Ansett. That was just before it collapsed. And William Mercer was 2 days, but it was a big name, so I put it in there. And so do you see the point? You can just summarise that whole period without having to mention the gaps, because it's true. Between that date and that date, this is what I did do. And so all of those muffin cooking days are eliminated and it looks like I've been fully employed my whole working life, which, you know, motherhood's another job just as much as any others. So yeah, so that's how I did it. And, you know, other things I put in just for fun and yeah, so on and so forth. But I went to one conference and there was a woman there who was talking about people who'd come out of jail. And what they were taught to do on their LinkedIn profile was to mention that they were studying and chefing and blah, blah, blah. And the employer's name was the name of the holding company for the jail. So XYZ, you know, facilities, PTY, LTD or whatever. And obviously, when they got to the job interview, they had to disclose that they'd been in jail. But if they were just going for a job on a construction site, who cares? You know, they're not going to, if they were a pedophile, they're not going to be anywhere near children on a construction site. And they're perfect, and they should, just as everybody else, have an opportunity to work. So I thought that was a really good way to, as I said before, massage the message so that you can tell that story.
Back in the old days, you might have referred to it as working for Her Majesty.
Yes.
Her Majesty's pleasure. That was an expression.
Yes, same here in New Zealand. All right.
Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Sue. That was great.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And I should probably say kia ora, thank you, and goodbye, because we've taken up far too much of your time. But thank you so much for your generosity. It's been a real pleasure. And I'll have to arrange. Can we pay by PayPal?
Yes. There's usually a processing fee, but I'll waive that. That's fine. Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
Well, we could probably work something out. I'll email you, and our people will talk to your people. Thank you very much, Sue.
Thanks for being brave enough to come along, ladies, because not everybody makes the time to learn, and you've done it. So, you know, Nolene, you're already on the path.
There we go. Look out.
Good night.
you.
I'll end the session. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Jen.
Good night.